Hey up, I'm Guy Kestevan, the Tester Man, and today I'm testing Saracen's Ariel 30 base model. Not the bike that Saracen might say it is, and definitely got some idiosyncrasies that could be seen as pros and cons. But if you want to get Sendy without getting Spendy, then it might be the best bargain you can buy in Britain right now. So, according to Saracen, this is a downcountry bike, and Ollie is someone who can ride technical stuff. But neither of those are really true, because while it's got 130mm of travel, front and rear, it's definitely not downcountry. 15.3 kilos, it's just not light enough, but also, it's just far more a rad and rowdy short travel trail bike than it is a sort of cross-country bike that's been beefed up. And as long as you lean into that, you'll have an absolutely fine time on it. But there are some decisions being made with the spec that kind of compromise what it's really good at in favour of trying to chase that downcountry tag. But when Saracen started putting this bike together, it's a relatively old bike now, 4 or 5 years old. Downcountry was the hot phrase, in the same way that super boost axles look like the next big thing too, but more on that later. So first off, why is it not a downcountry bike, and why are the reviews that say it's great for pedalling all day a bit off? I mean, to be fair, it is efficient in terms of pedalling, considering its background. There is a bit of movement, but not so much it disturbs your pedalling stroke or is depressing. But not only are the medium and the small mullet bikes as standard, which means a smaller rear wheel, so it doesn't roll as easily or as quickly as a 29er, but also they've gone for a relatively aggressive tyre choice, front and rear. You're looking at Maxxis DHR2, whereas if this was a true downcountry bike, you'd be talking Forecasters, Recons, that kind of rubber. And again, as you can see, it muscles up a climb with plenty of traction and a degree of poise from that 76.5 degree seat angle. And that's the first buyer beware element, really, because it's super long in terms of geo. So I normally go for a large, but a large on this 505mm reach, and even this medium is 480mm reach, so a lot longer than your average trail bike. And also with a 440mm rear end, it's a super stable chassis overall. But where this bike really comes alive is that rear suspension, because Saracen has done a sensational job on the back end of this bike. 130mm of travel, performance float shock, so no piggyback, but God, it feels good through that rear wheel. Really plush, tons of traction, like I say. So the grip's excellent, despite it only being a 2.3-inch tyre back there. But there's plenty of support when you're berming and gurning as well. Apart from that rear wheel, there's no size specific geometry changes on this. And even though Super Boost, which is 157 back end rather than 148, theoretically means you can have a shorter back end, actually Saracen haven't bothered doing that. They've still kept it relatively long. 440 rear end, and that's the same on all models, which means the whole bike's fairly long, which, you know, is great for stability and security. But you're definitely relying on the fact that that 157 back end is pretty stiff to force it through turns tightly. And also that smaller rear wheel does help, because that's the whole point of mullet, with your scrub radiuses and everything else, just making it a bit of a more of a skid steer situation. And also, as well as being broader and so bigger triangulation, you've got some proper oversized bearings holding that back end together, because, you know, this is, remember, a free ride ready frame with a different shock and linkage in. So it's a 37mm main pivot, and then even suspension pivots are 28mm. So it's a proper solid piece of kit. Oh, hello, spaniel fella. So the tracking is bob on at the back, and to be fair, seems really solid at the front as well. I mean, I've ridden 60 way back when with a coil shock on. So I'll link that at the end, because that bike's still available. But there are a couple of things to bear in mind with Geo. It's very low slung, is this medium. It's kind of the height you'd expect for a medium, even a short medium. So 410mm seat tube, which means that you can get a really long seat post in here. I could have a 200mm stroke in here, no problems. And it comes with 170 as standard. But the head tube is really short. And I guess that's just a sign that it's a relatively old bike, before stack became a big talking point. So with a low rise bar, you know, that it suits it for climbing and chewing around on this kind of stuff. I think your more Sendy folks are going to want a higher rise bar from a more upright position. And that's definitely true once you start pushing the front end hard, because, you know, 65-degree head angle means it's agile rather than absolute plough. But that Mazzocchi Z24, perfectly decent foot for a hardtail, or, you know, for a budget bike. But once you start hitting things fast and repetitively, that rail damper starts to feel a bit queasy, starts to lose control. And that's something that this TRL suspension absolutely loves doing, is encouraging you to push this bike hard, because it certainly feels like you've got more than 130mm of travel, even though it's actually pretty hard to get full travel out of it. It's actually a fairly progressive setup as standard, which again really suits this bike's ability to drive and throw shapes and hip around like a proper hero. And some of the spec is well up for that. You know, you've got 32-hole DT Swiss rims, well ready for some punchy, dangerous sending. But then, presumably to save weight for that downcountry tag, you've only got 2-pot Dior brakes and 180mm rotors, whereas a 4-pot Dior brake and at least a 200 on the front would certainly give you a lot more stopping power and control. And also, why they fit the 2.3 on the back when you can get this same tyre in a 2.4 or 2.5, and it comes in a 2.4 on the 29? I don't know, because there's plenty of space for it. And together with that smaller rear wheel means you're getting more of a battering than you would otherwise from the back end. And it's not just on descent, but a bit more rear tyre volume would be helpful. It's on climbs as well, because you've got that stiff rear end. It is quite liable to squirt out sideways if you get it slightly offline, because otherwise, as you can see, our suspension tracks really, really nicely over jank like that. And in terms of the rest of the spec, you know, full Dior, apart from a KMC chain, which, you know, makes shifting a little more nutty and grunchy sometimes, whatever grunchy is. You get an SLX rear mech. Although, to be fair, again, this is a bike that's going to spend quite a lot of time at risk of being laid down at speed if you're riding it properly. So, don't know why they didn't just put a Dior on. But hey, you know, Madison a Shimano distributor and the powerhouse behind Saracen. So, let them have their Shimano flex. Because you do get, you know, some nice upmarket features, like a race face Chester bar and stem in a perfectly proportioned to the geometry 50mm stem length and 780mm bar width. So all that front end is a relatively long way off. It never feels like it's out of reach. And you get really nice sticky ODI grips as well. And the whole bike just feels really, really centred. And while BBE height is middling at 30 mil drop, you always feel, well, considering the tyre spec, you always feel really kind of centred, supported and engaged through high speed turns. And it doesn't bog and bobble too much, even when you're pedaling squares at the end of the week, like I am today. And, sorry Saracen, there's one more thing that I've mentioned a couple of times, but I really need to kind of fully fill people in on what a potential issue is, and that's the Super Boost back end. While it is nice and stiff, and it was going to be the big new thing, because it's basically the same axle width as downhill bikes, and Pivot and Evil jumped on the bandwagon together with Saracen. All right, folks. Cheers. Thank you. Cheers, mate. Thanks a lot. Yeah. All right, mate. They're about the only ones. In fact, I'll give you a point in the comments if you can think of someone else who remembered it. All right, mate. How's that, boy? All right, fella. So that means you're looking at a real spares issue if you do have a problem with the rear hub. I mean, you can get them, and if you buy the frame only for $8.99, Madison will actually throw in a free VT Swiss hub in the right width. But you know, it's something worth stocking up on if you're planning on running this bike long term. But the massive win with it at the moment is, while it was decent enough value at £2.5 the original RRP, right now it's 1,600 quid for this complete bike. So you have got plenty of spending money to burn through. High up, accidental Strava line, and still get yourself an absolute bargain with this Saracen Ariel 30. And like I say, if you want to send without the spend, it's an absolute little short travel ripper. Right, it's absolutely rinsing it down, and to be honest, I think I've said everything I need to in terms of live ride review. And if there's anything you want to know that I haven't said, I'll be doing a full tech talk round in the workshop on it, so you can have a proper up close and look, and we can, you know, we can talk about that clever little linkage And we can talk about the idiosyncrasies and pros and cons of the spec. And but yeah, we'll do all that in the workshop where it's dry. But hopefully I've got across exactly how this rides and what the kind of riding it loves. You know, it's just a cracking bike for having a razz around the woods, all the jumps or the bike park, whatever, with your mates. But it's not a downcountry bike. So don't buy it for that. There's other bikes you can get for that. That Neuron I did recently, or Specialized Chisel Evo or something. That's more your downcountry bike. This is a proper short travel ripper, as you know, which isn't surprising given the frame, given the geo, and given the Saracen background. So don't necessarily believe the marketing on this one, but believe the reality of riding it as depicted on this Guy Case TV video featurette. And for once, I actually remembered not only to use my clever little Sendy, not Spendy phrase in the intro, but in the outro as well while I was riding. And I'm going to put it on the thumbnail. So look at that. Goals unlocked. We're almost approaching professionalism. Look at that. And a beautiful look. And I'm wearing a Madison. These are Madison dungarees. And they're dead good. I'm not the person who's going to make them look best, because I appear to have like a Vic Reeves and Bob Mortimer 7 mesh turtleneck on as well, and I look more like that bloke out of oh, what's it called? Not Shameless, the other one, Brassic. That's it. I look more like the farmer out of, even more like the farmer out of Brassic. But if you are Brassic, I didn't even plan this one. This is good. Didn't even plan it. This is a Friday afternoon improv. If you are Brassic and you want a really, really good basic bike that you can then upgrade into a proper ripper with a new rear tyre and probably beef up the brakes and eventually, you know, hop up the fork, and you can stockpile some Super Boost hubs, then this Ariel 30 base model is brilliant. And if you can muster up 2k, then the Pro is an absolute bloody bargain, because you get Fox Performance and a whole host of other spec upticks, which I'll talk about in the workshop video. But for now, do the subscribing notification. Actually, do you know what? I always blitz through this bit, but if you could subscribe, if you haven't already, that would be bloody brilliant. And tell your mates to do the same. Tell your mum to do the same. Get your cat to swipe the keyboard in an appropriately signing-on-y manner. You know, any pets. I'm not just cat specific, you know. If you've got an iguana and he likes a bit of YouTube, get him on the subscribers list. And if he wants to really support the channel, tell him to uncurl that massive tongue, switch colours, and... No, that's chameleons, isn't it? Oh, God. I need some sugar, quite clearly, or maybe I've had enough. Anyway, if you want to pay for the next dose of sugar, whether I should have it or not, there's Patreon and there's also YouTube, thanks. But for now, I've been Guy Case on Guy Case TV, clearly getting carried away on the Saracen Ariel 30.